My name is Laura Muir. I'm Associate Director of Academic and Public Programs and a Research Curator at the Harvard Art Museums. And I want to welcome you all to today's program. I want to begin by acknowledging that Harvard University is situated on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Massachusetts people, and we strive to honor this relationship. Thank you all for joining us for this session in our series, Art Study Center Seminars at Home. This is an opportunity for us to share the art in the Harvard Art Museum's collection, as well as the diverse perspectives and expertise of our staff and occasionally special guests, which is the case today. Before the pandemic, we offered these sessions in our Art Study Center to small groups of no more than 15 participants, and we hope to return to this in the spring. But by presenting these online, we can share this live program with a much larger audience, while hopefully keeping some of the sense of intimacy and spirit of close looking of the in-person sessions. So next, I'd like to quickly just go over some logistics. We are using the webinar format in Zoom, so you will notice that your microphones are muted and your videos are not visible. Instead, we invite you to submit brief questions for our presenters via the Q&A box, which you should be able to access at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box during the presentation, but we probably won't be able to answer them until the end. And we have a rich presentation today, but so we may not have a lot of time for questions at the end, but we'll try to get to them. And one other note, we have closed captioning available for today's seminar. To follow along with captions, click the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Laursen, the museum's Alan J. Dworsky Associate Curator of Chinese Art, who will introduce our speakers and serve as the moderator for our Q&A later on.
Thank you, Laura. Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Laursen, and today it is my pleasure to introduce Hong Chun Zhang. Raised in a family of artists, Hong attended high school and received her BFA in fine style Chinese ink painting at the prestigious Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing. In 1996, she moved to the United States to pursue an MA from California State University at Sacramento and an MFA from the University of California at Davis. Upon completing her graduate work, Hong continued painting in ink, but also combined Chinese techniques and conventions with new materials like charcoal and larger formats. She developed her trademark Harry style in 2002. Hong has carried out fellowships and residencies in New York and Venice and has exhibited at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., Asia Society in Houston, the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, and other major museums. Public and private collections in Australia, Europe, and Asia have acquired her work for their permanent collections, and most recently, that includes the Harvard Art Museums. This year, we purchased 10 paintings and preparatory drawings, and I am delighted to share that a pair of hanging scrolls entitled 60s were installed last week in the later Asian art galleries on the second floor in a new rotation of artworks focused on picturing the lives of women. When writing the labels for this installation, I asked Hong whether she preferred to be identified as Chinese or American or Chinese American. Having now lived half her life in each country, she told me that she considers herself first-generation Chinese American. Today, after giving a brief overview of her work, she will share her thoughts and experiences with Jerrica Li, who is co-founder of The Wave, Harvard's Asian literary and arts magazine, and is herself a second-generation Chinese American creator. I look forward to learning more about Hong's artistic vision and practice through their conversation. I will now turn it over to Hong.
Thank you, Sarah, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, Harvard Art Museums, for giving me this great opportunity to share my art practice and life stories, both in China and in the US. I would like to start with my family background. I was born in northeast of China called Shenyang, the capital city of Liaoning province, during the Cultural Revolution, and raised to a family of artists. My parents first had my older sister Ling for 8 years. Then they wanted to have a second baby, really wanted to have a son. On the first day of Chinese New Year, me and my twin sister came, and my parents gave us a middle name, Chun, meaning in Chinese spring, because we were born during the Spring Festival, and gave me first name Hong, meaning red in Chinese. So it's very typical revolutionary Chinese name during the 70s. These are the example of my family's work. You can see, even though we came from the same training background, still our artwork look pretty different. So you can see where my early art influence came from. At the age of 15, my twin sister and I passed the national exam, left hometown, went to Beijing Central Academy of Fine Arts to start our professional art training. First at the academy attached high school for 4 years, then spent another 4 years in the academy to work on single medium. I studied fine style figurative ink painting. These are the example of my undergraduate study work, and my twin sister focused in printmaking. Here I wanted to introduce you a basic 2 styles in Chinese ink painting. Freestyle on the left, done very fast with the different kinds of rice paper, which allow the ink and color to run. It have this wash and also expressive effect. The other one, however, on the right, fine style, which I studied, requires a lot of layers of details and time-consuming making process with different type of rice paper. Working with ink on rice paper is unforgiving. No mistakes are allowed. So understanding the medium and follow the precise making steps is very crucial. First, you start out with very detailed pencil sketch. Then you transfer it onto rice paper. Then you use tiny brush to draw the fine line with ink first. Then use a different kind of brush, a much bigger brush mixed with water to do the shading and the color rendering until you got enough lightness and darkness. Then you apply water-based color through many layers until you got this flawless effect. So even though I developed solid foundation in ink painting at the CAFA, the content of art was very restricted by the government at that time. So with my older sister's help, who came to the US in late 80s, me and my twin sister came to US in 1996. Here I want to show you my first series I did in America. It has to do with 3 generations of Chinese women, their joy and suffer felt by different period of time in Chinese history. Even though these are still traditional medium, I kind of add a little bit surrealistic reference in it. To me, is a way of, opens up my explorations using this politically incorrect subject, which I was not allowed to do in China, to express me being founded under the communist system. Then the more time I live in the US, the more I start to see the difference between two cultures. Now I started to shift from traditional ink medium to oil pen to give you a different view of looking at everyday objects or life experience from two different cultures. Then I started to think about, my identity as a Chinese American living in the US was my close relationship from my family connection. Think about how I can use, to make something break out, something challenging and bigger. Then I look at my relationship with my twin sister. We never been separated from birth all the way to late 20s until after I got married. So our close relationship really reflect this inseparable connection. You can see since high school, me and my twin sister have had long hair. Long hair has become part of our major characteristics. In this picture, we play our long hair around the necks. Looks like a black scarves. And then I also looking at the connection between the posters of Chinese door gods. They share the same kind of relationship of brave soldiers protect each household. Just like me and my twin sister, no matter where we are, we always protect each other. Then I'm thinking about how to use different medium and scale to exaggerate our connection, but also the length of long hair and the fluidity of the hair. I think the scroll using the format from Chinese ink painting, also larger than life scale, really create this three-dimensional effect based on a two-dimensional work on paper. And also the floor and the wall space really create and make sense with the gallery environment. Then I started making more family portraits, looking at triptych reference from both East and Western arts. For example, this is the Tiananmen Mao's temple in the northeast, west China. You have high leaders always in the center, military and intellectual advisors on both sides, just like me and my two sisters. My older sister is the supporting role in the middle. Then you have one left-handed and right-handed twins on each side. This is the longest charcoal drawing on paper I did for my MFA thesis show at UC Davis. I used long braids to represent a woman's life cycle in general through a healthy, black, shiny hair at the early stage of your life. Once you reach to middle life, your hair condition and color change, and eventually reach to the later life, your hair become thinner and falling on the ground, and color became white. Then after I became a mother, have my daughter, she also kept her hair longer. And this is my dedication to my daughter. It's about a mother and daughter's bonding relationship. After I became mother, I thought a lot about my own mother. When she was young, during the 60s, this is the typical hairstyles for women in China during the 60s. But with very large scale in ink medium, with traditional format of scroll, Usually this size of charcoal not requires as much time as this one with fine style detailed ink painting. You can see a lot of this scale of Chinese ink painting in freestyle, which is done very fast. This fine style you rarely see in this size. So the next slide, you can see it with a Jerrica standing next to my pair of scrolls. Even the scrolls I mounted in Beijing have, professional mounder did the job. That requires different type of, long time practice and training in that profession. So I was very happy now they find a good home in Harvard Museum. Right now, I want to show you a different composition of using traditional scroll and ink medium format to do something with a circular composition. Then square composition to show the different color of hair and style. Close-up view of hair, of body hair, can also be viewed as a landscape reference, almost looks like a tree trunk here. This is like a field of rice. Then this series really came from my immediate living environment. Every time I left home, my husband always found hair inside the house. So I kind of just express that, add that into my art in this series. Surrealistic elements and Dada concept has introduced in this series. Try to combine hair and everyday objects to show the different way of looking at long hair. It can be unattractive. This pair showed you the process of how the Chinese fine style ink painting finished from beginning to end. I'm glad Harvard acquired both of them, so it's a better way to present the viewers to appreciate the fine style ink painting process. So also this series work influenced by American pop art. Sometimes the titles also play the humor too. Nature-inspired work. After I finished my graduate school from UC Davis and moved to Lawrence, Kansas, I was very fascinated by the beauty of iconic tornado. So I combined my identity of long hair with Kansas' beautiful landscape. This wheat field become bread field. Also mixed medium of charcoal drawing and hay bales to give a little bit rural feel to it. Hay bale also functional as a Chinese scroll, and the horizontal composition really show the openness and the flatness of Kansas prairie. Now I also looking at hair with, another nature element of water. They both shared same quality, such as, when you have a tangled hair and the piece, smooth hair reminds me of life, has an up and down and quiet and dangerous moments. This piece also inspired by the famous Japanese woodblock print called Big Wave. Here to show you my early training of Chinese fine style ink painting as an evidence and contributed to my later large scale in charcoal medium, even though the medium is different. Ink painting, you cannot make mistake, but the charcoal, you can, erase and add more darkness. The only difference, the visual effect with ink on rice paper it can create softer tone, transparency of the water-based medium. With charcoal, you can get really big contrast between light and dark. This is my recent installation piece I did at Milan Rural Palace. Just before the pandemic, they invited me and flew me out to visit the site. So when I was there, I was inspired by the natural lighting came from outside, hit the floor just like a beautiful waterfall or the flow of the long hair. So came back to US, spent 6 months, finished 8 pieces. Each one is 5 feet wide by 30 feet long. First time working with ink on Italian fabric. But the final presentation is 4 pairs. Each pair is double-sided. Front is a waterfall, back is calligraphy of poem based on a famous poems during the Tang Dynasty. So the poem tells you different view of looking at waterfall. The content and the front image of waterfall image really related, and also provide more access to the audience. They can walk around the piece the same way as like viewing a 3-dimensional sculpture piece. This is how I work with large scale installation. Is a full body of work. I climb up and down just like a monkey. After a full day of working in my studio, I was totally beat. Here I want to show you the last series, most recent series, has a lot to do with my life experience during the lockdown. Many people, let their hair grow longer, serve as a mask, or black scarves. These become a new icon or hairstyle to me. During the pandemic, a lot of people experienced anxieties and isolations. So there's a deep need for connection between lovers and families. And this surreal life experience, we have to readjust and reset our button to find priority in life, and also doing meditation to help relax and cope with this difficult time. So the black and white color also, implied yin and yang relationship also has to tell the time. I continue use hair to capture the time change, also what happened during the pandemic. Several critical events happened. I kind of continue use hair and fist that based from my memory from China, Chinese Cultural Revolution posters to show my support for racial and social justice. This is the same pair of, Chinese fine style ink painting with preparatory drawing to show the Western fairy tale of Rapunzel, best expression of lockdown life. This is me raising a question about, death during the pandemic and death of gun violence still happening right now. With better control, maybe have better result. This is the last image of me working in my home studio during the lockdown. Even though I cannot do bigger work, but spending time in my home studio, I got a nice company with my cats and my family. Now I'm sorry, the talk have a time limit. I couldn't show you the full body of my work. If you have an interest, you can always visit my website to get more updates. And now I turn my speaker to Jerrica.
Thank you so much, Hong. I love that presentation. I learn more every time I see it, and getting to recently see the works in the art exhibition. I really hope everyone can get a chance to see what they look like in person. Hi, everyone. I'm Jerrica. For a quick introduction, I'm a senior at Harvard studying comparative literature, specifically on the fiction of Chinese diaspora. In fall 2019, I co-founded The Wave, Harvard's first literary magazine dedicated to uplifting Pan-Asian and Asian American creators in the Harvard community. Since then, we've grown to a super strong 20+ person team. We've released 4 issues, most recently a print issue actually this past week titled Seeds, and that was celebrated with a really lovely student open mic party. We're dedicated to printing issues composed by artwork from students in the Harvard community, but also about engendering conversations around Pan-Asian identity, art making, and highlighting inspiring Pan-Asian artists like Hong, who are asking important questions through their art. So Hong, in the time that we have, I want to start out by asking you about the political context and realities that are within your work, but also that you have experienced as a Chinese American artist. And so I'm really struck by the gender and social political overtones of your earlier works, specifically 3 Generations and 2 Cultures. So within the context of those works, can you tell me about how tied Chinese history and family is to you? And especially as a Chinese American female artist, what's been your experience exploring those thoughtful Chinese related subjects with Chinese styles and techniques in a Western context to an American audience?
That's a very good question. I think the 3 Generations really reflects my first 2 years of living in the US. I was a new immigrant to a foreign land and has been thinking a lot about my direct connection with my family back in China, especially my grandmother and my mother. Their generation of Chinese women had been through. So during the Cultural Revolution, their hardship from, my grandmother's generation of Chinese women, they've been through the arranged marriage or food binding practice. Till my mother's generation, they had a more opportunity to find their own husbands, but they were trapped by the political and the revolutionary campaigns. Till a later generation of Chinese women, they also under the pressure of raising a perfect single child. So compared to their life experience back in China, I feel very fortunate living in the US, but I also feel like the deep, connection. I got really homesick the first 2 years. So the 3 Generations really is my expression during my first couple of years of living in the US. Also, even though I used the traditional Chinese medium for that series, the politically incorrect subject matter became my first area of interest. That was new to me. To me, it was a challenge. To me, it's like a freedom to explore other areas. Then after the 2 years of living in the US, I started to see the difference between 2 cultures. That's why I kind of, put that thoughtful observations into my work and using oil medium instead of traditional ink medium. Then I started thinking about my identity as a Chinese woman, how I can break out from traditional medium to make something, larger than lifestyles and also with different medium that can create more, visual dynamic, at the same time has a universal meaning that everybody can respond it to. So the bottom line is, no matter small or big, traditional medium and more westernized, installation format, still the same level of details in layers has remained. And that became the strength of my work up till now. So really the history, Chinese history and heritage, more or less from the beginning of my work till now, still there, but started to become less obvious compared to my early work.
Yeah, it's very clear that these are kind of challenging themes, and it sounds like they were challenging for you too, to conceptualize and to work through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can see that as a viewer, how much effort you put in. And to me, especially seeing your artwork up close, it occurred to me that your artwork is so full of love in how physical it is, how meticulously handcrafted it is, and layered. I think your work actively wants to draw people closer and into it.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question is on that. It's about the process of your creation and the different mediums that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk more about how your artwork differs from that traditional ink style painting in technique and in material? Why have you made some of those choices? And as well, your oeuvre spans many different scales of paintings,
Mm-hmm.
some that are 1 to 2 feet, to some that are life size, and in the case of your Milan work, larger than life. And your collected work also plays with 2 and 3 dimensional works, and sometimes that gray area between the illusion of 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional to a viewer. So can you tell me about some of your reasoning behind those decisions of technique and form, but also of scale and dimensionality?
Yeah, that's very good. Concrete question for artists. Decision of, or choice of choosing different medium and scale. I think I chose different medium and scale really based on the conceptual and compositional reason first. Before I move to different medium and scale, first, you have to spend enough time to explore and understand each different medium well, and to be able to understand each medium's limitation and uniqueness, which could not be replaced by other medium. And bigger doesn't matter, better doesn't means better, and smaller doesn't mean not good. It all depends on what concept you wanted to express or achieve. For example, when I started thinking about how I can make a big impact of work that have a 3-dimensional effect based on 2-dimensional work. In that large charcoal drawing on paper, for instance, live strings, the long braid has to be long enough to occupy the wall and floor. So I made that decision with large scale first. Then think about material. I think with the rice paper on ink in fine style could not create as a big contract as charcoal in on paper. Also, that large scale require a strong physicality in the space. So then I decided to use charcoal on a large scale of a drawing paper instead of traditional medium. And another example of, when you work with ink on rice paper, it become very soft tone to keep the beauty of translucent or transparent of water-based medium, with a smaller composition, more close-up view of hair that almost like looking at hair under microscope. it creates this illusion and reality. Also with a big scale of work, I want to draw in my audience from distance to see the shape of the image. Once you get closer, you'll see many layers of details, surface built by thousands of charcoal marks. Then they realize, oh, it's not just a tornado. It's full of hair, fins of hair. So I kind of like to play out with a large scale between near and far, illusion and reality. That's what I've been playing, the duality in my work, play this relationship also in smaller scale, even though I can use the detailed work to get the viewer to have more intimate experience with my work and feel like get lost with all the details. So the bottom line is, the decision make in terms of different medium and scale really has to support my vision. And I wanted to also talk about a practical reason. Sometimes when you work at a home studio during the lockdown, you cannot make a large work, only smaller size work. And I also think about my health reason. When I'm pregnant, I couldn't do large charcoal medium because I'm afraid the charcoal dust will affect my health. Then I shift to small graphite studies and ink medium. Also, I like to balance out between small and bigger scale. That can help me with my health. After a long time of working with large scale, you wanted to shift back to smaller scale, just balance out so I can have long, productive life. Yeah.
Yes, it is so true that your artwork is such a labor of love, and it comes through when you view the work and you see it in its tremendous scale, taller and larger than life. So the last question I ask is a question I feel like I must ask. It centralizes on this concept of hair as a symbol in your art. And it makes me very conscious that I wanted to have nice, presentable hair for this presentation. But hair is embodied in your work, literally in human forms, in noodles that are in takeout containers, in the lines that create calligraphy characters in so many ways. And the symbol of hair can hold different meanings for people based on their identity, their gender, their culture. Really, every individual viewer can relate to hair in a unique way. And I thought when I first viewed your work, that's what was so beautiful to me about it, is because it's both very highly personal to you and the women in your family of all generations, but also it's a very universal symbol. So I'd love to hear how you started to think about hair as a subject, and how has that symbol changed for you over time? And if you could also talk about specifically the pandemic and whether that's changed any of your thinking as well.
Okay, that's great. Hair, you saw my slides. Before hair, I did two cultures that involved with people who has experienced this two different lives, have a better appreciation of two culture series. Then I started to think about me as an Asian American living in America. What's my identity? What is my cultural heritage? How I can use my training back in China as a strength in my work, but also look inward about myself rather than talking about my mother, my grandmother. What about me? After I live in the US, I become Asian American. That's the new life I have been living in America. So that's why I wanted to create a new portrait of me with my twin sister, because we both have had long hair. I wanted to use long hair to exaggerate our major characteristics as individual and as siblings. That's how the long hair came about. Then I thought about, I don't want to, make just regular traditional portrait of heads. I wanted to enlarge the size to make the emphasis on the beauty of long hair. So by using a larger than life size scale, really create this monumental, iconic effect of double images, almost identical from distance. But once you get closer, you'll notice the difference in between, almost like a mirror reflection. That's kind of my breakout from traditional medium to charcoal and on large scale paper, presented almost like a three-dimensional sculpture piece. Then at the same time, I also think about hair can create many meanings beyond the surface that has a different representations based from different cultures. When you see hair in the Midwest, Mideast, many my Iranian friends saw the piece, they feel like a burqa covered hair because those images didn't show any, facial details, only the full body covered with hair. And hair also relate to people's, life forces, health conditions. And when you got sick, you got cancer, the obvious sign of the hair loss. And when you experience some big life changes, the first thing you want to do is cut your hair. Then when you're getting older, your hair color change. And when you become a monk or join the military, soldiers, prisoners, and monks always shave their hair, not just only for the hygiene reason, but also is to stop or reduce the temptations for, any kind of sexual activities. Also, hair have a direct relationship with nature, the life cycle of growth, regrowth, and we have to keep our healthy body to be able to show in your hair, and also keep taking good care of the environment. So the whole universal connection is here. It's like a Chinese Taoism. From one, you grow to two, two grow to three. Even though my hair is the first one image, it really layered up with more meanings behind the image. That's what my ultimate goal, that's what I wanted to achieve, to find a universal theme that everybody can relate to, no matter they know Chinese history or Chinese culture, they can still be able to appreciate in different level. And the strength and the wow, the experience to my audience is the large scale with detailed work. That has been staying and remain in my work, no matter what kinds of subject and form. And I also wanted to talk about how I can combine hair in my nature inspired work. After I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, so I combine hair with Midwest landscapes. That's the perfect presentation of Middle Kingdom, Midwest. That show me as an Asian American living in the Midwest. And also think about hair and everyday objects. That not just relate to my personal life experience, that also can affect, everybody experience. If they have a long hair, when you see them in your food, it become unattractive. So I kind of play out with a humor and, proportion at the same time, looking at hair in an unattractive way, instead of, hair not always represents the beauty. And also think about my recent installation, how I can move further and break out even more through a two-dimensional presented in three-dimensional installation, working with fabric. The fabric itself can be a sculpture material. and also serve as a surface for ink medium. So with all that in mind, this is my purpose, to just wanted to get broader audience, draw them into my work. As long as I can hold them in front of my piece, that's my success. So if you cannot hold the audience in front of your work for that long, you failed your job as an artist. At least to me, I think about that a lot. Yeah. With the pandemic work, it's like a natural development of my evolution of my work. So everybody has an effect by the pandemic. They probably showed, artists have a different, like a direct response, like me using hair to express my feelings. Some people maybe use metaphor in abstract way, but for me, it's very natural development of moving and continue using hair to capture the change with the time period, but also capture the anxiety and isolation and the desire and concern during this difficult time. Yeah. I think Sarah, now I wanted to ask more questions from the audience, right?
Thank you, Hong and Jerrica, for this wonderful discussion. Yes, we have a number of wonderful questions from our audience, and I want to make sure we have a little time to address them. So the first question we have for you is from one of our conservators at the Harvard Art Museums. Penley Knipe asks, can you say how you protect the charcoal on your scrolls? Do you fix the charcoal? What do you use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always use a fixative spray after I finish the charcoal drawing, and also use glassy thin paper put on top of the charcoal drawing when I wrote up for the transportation. And the workable spray can still allow me to go back if there's a smudges or the charcoal surface has been took out. I can always add. Interest question from professionals, because when I showed a 4 big large scroll of charcoal drawing at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, and in the middle of the exhibition, they called me, said, "Hong, please come here to help out because we found the fingerprints on the surface of your charcoal drawing," because I showed without any, frame or protection. Even though they put a barrier around it, still the Smithsonian is free to everybody. So even though they have a guard standing there, still you see a fingerprints at 3 feet tall and 5 feet tall fingerprints. So I know which one is the kids touch the surface, which one is the adult, because I think the audience just so curious, drawn by the surface. They don't know whether it's a photograph or a real charcoal. So they wanted to touch it. I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just use the eraser." They said, "No, it's on the contract. We cannot do that until the artists have to fix it." So they flew me out to, just spend, couple minutes to fix it. Then that show traveled to Asian Society in Houston, and they told them to make sure have a solid, a bigger barrier so can protect the surface. That's very good question from
I've always been amazed at how clean you've kept the white surfaces on your works. It's really
that has a lot to do with my training back in China in fine style Chinese ink painting. Yeah.
Our next question comes from Heather Linton, and she asks, do you work from life, that is models or collected hair, or do you work from the imagination, or from both?
Great question. I kind of work from both. When I work with hair and object series, I use the hair I cut off and place in the actual objects, put a set on the table, use that as my still life setting for that series. Sometimes I will ask my husband to take a picture of my hair as a reference to do more detailed work, but I didn't really rely 100% rely on the reference. Always use as a information for detailed work. Yeah, so I use both still life and a photograph, but have never tried to use real hair to make artwork. Always draw the image of hair. Yeah.
That's interesting because it's becoming increasingly common for artists to use actual human hair in their works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So our next question comes from Marcia Cohen, and she's marveling at the number of subjects that you've illustrated using this imagery of hair. And she wonders if you've ever thought about creating a graphic novel to tell stories through your art. And she also wonders what her favorite type of image is.
She want to tell me my favorite.
Oh, no.
She asked me my favorite piece. Oh, I think the first question is interesting because I have been thinking about that for my next project. Not necessarily in graphic novel, but I want to make animation work or album books have this narrative story or plot through hairs. So I'm interested you ask that question, not necessarily in written words, but a combination of narrative and animation. I think with animation, that really is the best medium to support my concept and vision. My favorite art piece, it's hard to say. I think my recent work in Milan really showed the strength of my work and new medium with charcoal on fabric that kind of solved the question that the conservator asked me about, worry about charcoal in large paper, you worry about how to preserve and without smudge, but really the fine cell ink painting on fabric kind of solved the problem with large scale. You can sit down on the fabric, you can walk on, you can, really fully engage with the material. I think I did pretty successful in terms of form and content with that piece. That's where I see my going next, to do more set-specific large installation, eventually turn to, three-dimensional work.
And that was an incredible show from what I've seen in video, and we'll be sure to share the link to the video of the Royal Palace exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our next question comes from one of your colleagues who has worked with you at the Spencer Museum of Art at the University of Kansas. Sarah Lynn Reese-Hardy asks, can you address the responsibilities that you feel are important for artists in their many communities in studio art in the world?
Yeah, I think, as an artist, our duty not just make art, also think about how to use your art to educate or express or make statements for the audience to be aware or response to, current issues. When people talk about contemporary art, I kind of to think about how you can make art that responded to contemporary issues. That's, for me, is very crucial as an artist. Also think about the community as well. I, as an Asian American artist living in the Midwest, I feel like it's my duty to introduce more traditional art mediums that I trained back in China to, give people more opportunity to understand this Western medium, at the same time to be able to involve with the community, not as an international artist, but also as a local artist, as a group to support with local and the international level. I think that's, yeah, is very important role as an artist.
Absolutely. And we're running a little bit low on time. So there's one question of my own I wanted to make sure I had a chance to sneak in. I wondered if you have any advice for artists and other creators like Jerrica and her colleagues at the Wave that you might be able to offer.
Well, that's a good question. You know, when I was a student at UC Davis, graduate students, I had the privilege working with Professor Wen Thibault. And before I graduated, I said, Professor Thibault, can you give me advice as a student, how I can survive in a Western art world, how I can find a gallery representation? He said, don't worry about it. The first thing for you is to make best artwork, and then the gallery will find you. So it's based from my experience, I think it came true. I didn't really think about the gallery or market first. I just do the best art I can do, then the gallery will find me. You know, the director of gallery or museum curator will always find me. So I think his suggestion, it came true from my experience, and I would just like to pass on that to the younger artists. So don't want to find a gallery representation right away. You know, making art is lifetime learning experience. At any age, any stage of your career, you always feel there's a limitations in your art practice. You want to explore and learn more things that will benefit, become beneficial to your art, no matter what. So I never thought about I will create work for certain exhibitions or galleries. No, I always make work just for myself and my own development of my work, and move further, try to introduce any new medium, new concept into my work, even though I still use hair as a theme. But you can see from my slideshow, every series I introduced a new medium, a new form, and new concept. Yeah, that's my suggestion for the younger artists.
Thank you, Hong.
Well, thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation. And I hope if you are local that you'll take the chance to stop into the galleries and see Hong's work. And please be sure to check out the Wave as well. I've dropped the link into the chat. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Also, thank you, Hong, Jerrica, Sarah, and I want to thank our audience as well. We had fabulous questions and more than we had time for today. We will be following up this session with an email with some links so that you can keep exploring Hong's work. We'll be sharing the object list from today's session and also a short survey that we hope you'll have a chance to complete. And also please keep an eye on our calendar where we will be posting our spring seminars. So thank you all again. Thank you so much, Hong and Jerrica and Sarah, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.